It began with a listing. A quiet apartment in the Dakota, the storied building on West 72nd Street in Manhattan. Yes, that Dakota. The same gothic fortress where John Lennon once lived and died. But this story isn't his. This story belongs to apartment 5E, once the private sanctuary of Anne Bancroft. An apartment that had, for many years, remained untouched since her passing in 2005. Even after Mel Brooks quietly sold it off, something about the place kept it off the market for years. In early 2023, the unit finally surfaced gutted, remodeled, staged with minimal elegance. The realtor avoided questions about the former tenant. "The place has good bones," he said. "Classic pre-war charm. You'd be buying history." Michael and Lily Corcoran, a couple in their early 40s from Boston, didn't care much for celebrity gossip or old Hollywood. They were more interested in quiet luxury, and the Dakota's heavy walls promised just that. Michael worked remotely in finance, and Lily, a former classical pianist, had recently taken a sabbatical from her conservatory job due to a vague sense of burnout. They had no children, no pets, just each other and now this apartment. When they moved in that May, they knew only the basics, and Bancroft had lived there. She was in The Graduate. She was married to Mel Brooks. That was about it. What they didn't know, what no one had told them, was that she had died just a few blocks away, at Mount Sinai Hospital, and that the apartment had never quite let her go. The first signs were easy to explain away. Light bulbs that fizzled too fast. A faint whiff of perfume, something floral and powdery that came and went in the master bedroom. The temperature always seemed cooler in the hallway, no matter how high the thermostat was set. Michael joked that old buildings had their own ecosystem. Lily said it was probably nothing. But by June, Lily had started playing the piano again. Only, she played pieces she didn't remember learning. Melancholy etudes. Fragile, minor-key lullabies. "They're beautiful," she told Michael one evening, her fingers still trembling. I don't know where they came from." They kept to themselves. No parties. No noise. But the neighbors, those old, guarded Dakota residents, had their eyes on them. A few offered tight smiles in the elevator. A doorman named Claudio, who'd been there longer than most, warned them about the air in 5E. He didn't elaborate. Lily began dreaming of a woman in shadow, standing by the bedroom window and whispering to herself. Her voice was low, weary. She said the same thing night after night. "You don't understand. I wasn't her. I was so much more than her." One rainy evening in July, Lily wandered into the small study and found a dusty envelope behind the radiator. Inside were old photographs, some studio portraits, some casual black and white snapshots, and Bancroft in her youth, laughing with Mel, sitting at the very window where Lily had seen her in dreams. Shaken, she brought them to Michael, who had recently noticed the scent of roses lingering even in the closed guest room. They began researching Anne's life. The interviews, the stage roles, her intensity, her intelligence, the weight of being constantly remembered for one performance, when she had lived 1,000. Lily began keeping a journal. She wrote in it obsessively, almost like she was channeling someone else's thoughts. Her writing became erratic. Phrases she didn't recognize. "It's not the role that haunts me, it's the forgetting." Michael grew worried. One morning, he found all the mirrors in the apartment covered with bedsheets. Lily said she couldn't bear to see her reflection anymore. In August, a private investigator contacted Michael. He'd been hired by a developer sniffing around the Dakota and had heard rumors of a stuck spirit in apartment 5E. He said, "Look, I don't believe in this stuff, but the guy before you, an artist, he only lasted 2 weeks, said he felt like he was being studied, like someone was always watching from the corner of the room." The investigator handed over a manila envelope with audio cassettes, recordings the artist had made. On them, the sound of a woman pacing, whispering, humming. One tape ended with a soft knock at the mic, followed by a single phrase. "I'm not her. She died. But I didn't." Lily, listening late into the night, began sobbing. "She's lonely," she said. She was so much more than Mrs. Robinson. She hated that name. In September, Lily suffered a breakdown. She was hospitalized briefly after collapsing during a recital at a local venue. She tried performing one of her ghost songs publicly. Witnesses said she'd stopped mid-performance, looked into the crowd, and whispered, "She's here." After her release, they left the apartment. Quietly, without ceremony. The listing reappeared by Winter, tastefully vague, still emphasizing celebrity provenance. They moved back to Boston. Lily no longer played. "She doesn't speak much about New York," Michael said once to a colleague over drinks. It wasn't a haunting. It was more like a presence that wanted to be remembered right. The apartment remains unsold. Some say, late at night, you can hear a woman's voice through the radiator vents, humming the melody of a forgotten lullaby. And in the hall mirror outside apartment 5E, a few claim they've seen her reflection poised, sad-eyed, elegant. Not Mrs. Robinson. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. Outside the Dakota, the city never slowed. Even on the quietest nights, traffic murmured across Central Park West like a river of steel and light, and the wind, when it swept low across the rooftops, had a way of wrapping itself around the wrought iron balconies like it was trying to whisper secrets to the stone. Inside apartment 5E, however, time had taken on a different rhythm. Though they'd left in a hurry, the Corcorans hadn't taken everything. A scarf of Lily's cashmere, ivory-colored, was still draped across the back of a velvet settee near the window. A few marked-up sheet music books lay abandoned on the piano bench, their corners curled. In the hallway, the antique mirror that had been there long before the Corcorans ever moved in, long before even in herself, if the building records were to be believed, remained untouched, its glass dulled at the edges like silver worn thin. The mirror was an oddity. No matter how many times cleaners came through, no matter what solution they used, a film remained soft, barely perceptible but always present. As though the glass was resisting clarity, holding something back. Mrs. Callahan had lived across from 5E for 39 years. A retired librarian with silver hair and a wardrobe of wool cardigans in varying shades of gray. She was the kind of woman who spoke softly and carried heavy opinions. She remembered, and well. Not in the way fans did with the glamour and the movies. She remembered her quiet. The way she would tiptoe down the hallway barefoot in the mornings, holding a paper cup of coffee with both hands. The way she never spoke above a whisper when inside the elevator. She was gentle, Mrs. Callahan told her niece during a phone call, but there was something in her eyes like a storm she kept hidden behind the calm. When the Corcorans moved out, Mrs. Callahan began to hear it again. The humming came through the walls late at night. Not loud, not eerie, just persistent. A tune with no clear melody, like someone searching for the right notes but never quite settling. At first, she blamed it on the new staging crew. But when she knocked on the apartment door one afternoon, the man who answered, the real estate agent, said flatly, "Nobody's staying there right now. Just me. And I don't sing, ma'am." Back in Boston, Lily couldn't sleep. Her days were calm. Michael encouraged her to paint, to walk, to try something new. She went along with it, smiled, kept busy. But the dreams returned every night, thick and colorless and slow, like they were coming up through water. Always the same woman, always standing at the mirror. In the dream, the apartment was dark. The hallway stretched impossibly long. And the woman, Anne, she knew it was, and stood facing the glass. But her reflection did not mimic her movements. It stared straight back, expressionless, lips barely parted. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it screamed with no sound. Lily began to paint her. Not as she was in photos, but as she appeared in the dreams, her hair slightly unkempt, a shawl drawn tightly around her narrow shoulders, eyes shadowed and enormous. The painting took over the guest room. Lily worked on it for hours at a time, often forgetting to eat. One night, Michael found her asleep on the floor in front of it, her hands smudged with oils and the scent of rose powder lingering faintly in the room. By January, Lily couldn't take it anymore. She told Michael she needed to go back. Not to live, just to see it. Just once. Just to walk the rooms and speak aloud to whatever remained. She needed to ask. He protested gently, but in the end he booked the train himself. 2 nights. Just them. The real estate agent agreed to give them access after hours, under the pretense of possible relisting interest. They arrived on a bitter Friday evening. The city was covered in a thin, dirty crust of snow, the kind that half melted underfoot and made every corner slick with slush. The doorman didn't remember them, but the moment they stepped into the lobby, Lily felt that odd drop in temperature. Like walking into a cathedral no one had prayed in for a very long time. The apartment was exactly as they had left it. The scarf still on the settee. The mirror still slightly fogged. The piano untouched, but the keys were whiter than they remembered, as though freshly cleaned. Lily walked slowly from room to room, not speaking, not even touching the walls. And then she saw it. The mirror in the hallway. It no longer reflected her fully. The hallway around her appeared. Michael behind her appeared, but where her face should have been, there was only a blur, like breath on glass. She moved closer, pressed a hand to the frame, and behind the blur just for a moment she saw eyes. Dark, knowing, exhausted, not angry, not malevolent, just tired, and so full of something unsaid. She turned, ready to speak. She turned, ready to speak, but the words died in her throat. Behind her, Michael had stopped moving. His reflection stood perfectly still in the mirror, but something was wrong. His body in the hallway solid, breathing was turned slightly toward her, watching her with concern. Yet in the mirror, his form remained rigid, facing straight ahead like a man posed for a portrait he did not know was being painted. "Michael?" she asked softly. He blinked. "Yeah." She didn't answer. She reached for his arm instead, pulling him gently away from the mirror's line of sight. The reflection didn't follow. It stayed as it was Michael, standing in the hallway, frozen, vacant-eyed. Lily stepped back. Her heels made no sound on the old parquet floor. The hallway had gone thick and quiet again, like the walls had drawn breath and were holding it, waiting. The air smelled of dust and violet perfume. Anne's perfume, the one Lily had come to recognize so well, without ever knowing its brand. It seemed to rise from the floorboards now, clinging to the edges of the mirror, swirling in the corners of the hall like it was being exhaled by the building itself. I think we're not supposed to look too long," Lily whispered, her fingers trembling at her side. They moved slowly into the drawing room. It was the most elegant part of the apartment, the ceilings ornate with plaster medallions, the windows tall and heavy with dark velvet drapes. It felt like a room that had once hosted conversations in low, intimate voices. A room where secrets were spoken only through raised eyebrows and the tilt of a wrist. The grand piano sat in the corner, its lacquered black surface catching the ambient light. The top was closed. On the bench, the old sheet music remained exactly as Lily had left it nearly 5 months before. She walked over and picked it up, turning over the pages. Her notes were still in the margins. Her handwriting, but now, in pencil, a new phrase had been added at the top of one sheet. They only saw her when the lights were on. Lily didn't know what that meant, but it hit her somewhere below language, like something just outside memory. Something whispered to her once, maybe in a dream. She sat down at the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Michael stood at the threshold of the room, watching her uneasily. "Just for a moment," she said, "just to see if she's still here." The sound that came from the piano was unlike anything she remembered playing. The notes rang out hollow and slow, like they were falling through water. She didn't remember the song, but she played it anyway. The rhythm came from her bones, from some cold place just behind the heart. Each note landed gently, and in their silence afterward, the apartment seemed to exhale. From the far end of the hallway, a door creaked open. The guest room, once Anne's personal bedroom, now mostly empty, was wide open. Lily and Michael stood at the doorway together. The light inside was strange, pale, not electric, not sunlight, more like the dull gleam of a theater stage before the curtain goes up. In the center of the room, the antique vanity stood as it had since the 1940s, passed through tenants but never removed. Its triptych of mirrors formed a cold, broken circle of reflection. No light bulbs in the sockets, No makeup scattered across the wood. Just silence and the faint odor of talcum and iris. Lily stepped forward. Her reflection followed her in 3 fractured parts. She sat down on the stool. And slowly, in the glass, the room behind her began to change. The walls blurred. The window melted into shadow. And in the reflection, not in the room itself, but only in the glass, another figure stepped into view. Not young. Not Mrs. Robinson. Older. Thinner. Tired. Dressed in a dark silk robe, her hair pinned loosely. Her expression drawn in that particular way that famous women carry behind closed doors when there is no more pretending, no performance left to give. And looked at Lily, not through her, but directly at her. And then she said, clearly and calmly, "They only remember me when they need a villain. They never remembered the rest." Lily didn't scream. She felt no fear, only a profound, bone-deep sadness. Michael tried to pull her from the vanity, but she wouldn't move. Her hands gripped the stool, her eyes fixed on the center mirror. She whispered back to the woman behind the glass, "I remember the rest." For a moment, Anne's mouth twitched. A flicker of something almost like gratitude passed through her eyes. But it was fleeting. Behind her, in the reflected room, the shadows began to gather. The shape of a stage curtain appeared where the wall should be. A single spotlight cut down across the vanity. In the mirror, Anne Bancroft stepped back the way an actress does when the performance is ending. And as she faded into the gloom, a faint sound echoed from nowhere, an audience rising in slow, reverent applause. Lily let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The light in the room returned to normal. The mirror showed only her own reflection, now wide-eyed, pale, alone. Michael held her hand. Neither of them said a word. Downstairs, in the lobby, the doorman glanced toward the elevator. He reached for the logbook, where no one had written an entry yet, but the pen resting nearby had moved. And in careful cursive, across the top margin of the page, a message had appeared. "Tell them I was more than the part." They did not sleep that night. Michael tried. He lay on the old chaise in the drawing room, jacket thrown over him, eyes closed but never truly resting. Lily remained by the vanity for hours, her eyes locked on the mirror even after it had emptied, her thoughts shifting like waves against a seawall. The apartment, so grand in the daylight with its polished moldings and chandelier light, had grown dim and gentle, now less a place to live and more a memory to move through. The city beyond the windows pressed forward as usual. Taxis, late-night laughter, the deep hum of air shafts and elevator cables running through the bones of the building. But inside apartment 5E, the hours dragged slowly, like the room was suspending itself between past and present. Lily felt it most acutely near dawn, when the light outside turned blue and uncertain and the floor beneath her began to feel not quite solid. She wandered into the hallway again, this time barefoot, her fingers brushing against the wallpaper that had once belonged to Anne. It was then that she saw the envelope, slipped under the door. No sound had alerted them, no knock, no shuffle, no metallic click from the mail slot. Just there, waiting. A long, cream-colored envelope with Lily Corcoran written in script so precise and old-fashioned it might have been pulled from a letter dated 1954. She didn't pick it up at first. She crouched beside it, studying the ink, the edges. Michael stood behind her now, silent. She looked up at him. He nodded. Inside the envelope was a single piece of thick, ivory paper, folded once. The scent of perfume clung to it, faintly rose and powder and something dry, like dust from velvet. The note read, "When you leave, don't look back. I will not follow. I am home." It wasn't signed. It didn't have to be. The sun rose pale behind a veil of January fog. It threw wide beams across Central Park, making the treetops shimmer like ghosts from another season. Lily stood in the living room, gazing out one last time at the park, and must have stared at countless mornings. Coffee in hand, memory sharpening like a knife. The boxes were untouched. Nothing had been packed. But Lily understood now. There was nothing to take. The apartment had never belonged to them, not truly. It had only allowed them to borrow its history, its presence. And it had let and stay, quietly, waiting for someone who would remember her as a woman, not just a role. As they stepped into the hallway, Lily paused. Her hand hovered over the wall outside the door, the spot where a framed black and white photo once hung. And in profile, mid-sentence, caught unaware, her expression neither smiling nor dramatic, just real. Lily whispered, not to Michael, not even to herself. "Thank you." And the hallway light above them flickered once, gently before holding steady. The doorman, now changed since their last visit, tipped his cap and didn't ask why they were leaving so early. Perhaps he understood. Perhaps the building had whispered to him, too. As they crossed the threshold and stepped onto the sidewalk, the Dakota loomed behind them, its rooftops jagged against the milky sky, its windows dark and watching. Lily didn't turn around. Michael looked back once, but said nothing. And behind them, in the shadows of the fifth-floor windows, the faintest outline of a woman in a dark robe stood silently. Not waving, not moving, just watching, as though seeing off a guest she knew wouldn't return. The doorman glanced up toward that window, and for a moment he paled. But when he looked again, it was empty. The apartment stayed empty for 6 more months. Potential buyers came and went, many impressed, a few disturbed. One woman claimed she heard a voice humming as she opened the closet doors in the master bedroom. Another said the mirrors were off, though she couldn't explain how. A third, a young actor from Los Angeles, walked through the space quietly and then told the agent on the way out, "Beautiful place, but it's not done yet." When the apartment finally sold, it went to a professor of film history and his partner, a retired stage actress with a quiet fondness for the classics. On their first night in the space, they found a program tucked between 2 floorboards, an original Broadway playbill from 1958, for a play and had done early in her career. Not a blockbuster, just a play about 2 sisters in a small apartment, arguing about lost time and the meaning of silence. They framed it and hung it over the vanity. The mirror, for the first time in decades, cleared fully. And every now and then, usually at twilight, when the windows caught the fading pink of the skyline, there would be a scent in the air. Roses, powder, something velvet and forgotten, something grateful. They only remember the role. She remembered the woman. And don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.